The day of our luxury vacation I paid for, my wife said, "Wait for us at the airport. We'll be there soon." I waited for over 16 hours, but no one came, not my wife, children, or parents. I checked my social media and saw my wife's sister's post, having the best party in Hawaii. I saw my wife and her lover kissing in the photo. I booked a one-way ticket out and never returned. She finally tracked me down 4 years later, banging on my door for help, and 135 missed calls. Man, I should have known something was off when Mariah kissed me goodbye that morning. It wasn't one of those lingering, "I'm gonna miss you for the next 10 minutes" kisses. Nah, this was different, quick, almost guilty, like she was checking something off a to-do list. But I was too pumped up about our family vacation to read between the lines. I mean, we'd been planning this trip to Maui for months, and I dropped serious cash to make it perfect. We're talking first-class tickets for all 4 of us, a private villa right on the coast with those floor-to-ceiling windows that open up to nothing but ocean, personal chefs, guided tours of the island, the whole 9 yards. "Wait for us at the airport, babe," she'd said, adjusting her hair in the hallway mirror like she always did when she was nervous. "We'll be there soon. Just gotta grab a few last-minute things for the kids." I bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. So there I was at LAX at 8 in the morning, 3 hours before our flight, wearing my lucky linen shirt, the cream-colored one Mariah got me for my birthday last year. I felt like $1,000,000, honestly. I had everything organized in my carry-on. For passports lined up in order, boarding passes printed and double-checked, even though I knew we could just use our phones. But I'm old school like that. There's something satisfying about having physical tickets in your hand, you know? The real kicker was the 2 surprises I had tucked away in my bag. First envelope contained round-trip tickets for Mariah's parents. I'd bought them in secret because I knew how much it would mean to her to have her mom and dad there. Sure, they could be a pain in the ass sometimes, especially her dad with his constant political rants and her mom's passive-aggressive comments about my cooking, but family's family, right? The second envelope had a prepaid Visa card loaded with $5,000. Spending money for everyone. I wanted this trip to be stress-free. No one worrying about buying souvenirs or splurging on those overpriced resort drinks with the little umbrellas. I planted myself near Gate 32, right by those massive windows where you can watch the planes taxi around. The place was buzzing with that classic airport energy. Families dragging oversized suitcases, business travelers clutching their coffee like lifelines, kids pressing their faces against the glass, pointing at every plane that rolled by. I people-watched for a while, imagining Ava and Julian doing the same thing when they got here. Ava would probably have her nose buried in one of those fantasy novels she's always reading, while Julian would be bouncing off the walls asking me a million questions about how planes work. The departure board kept updating, and our flight was still on time. Perfect. I checked my phone, 8:47 a.m. Mariah and the kids should be leaving the house right about now. Traffic from our place in Woodland Hills to LAX could be brutal, but I'd factored that in when I told them to leave by 9. We had plenty of buffer time. I grabbed a coffee from that overpriced Starbucks near the gate, $7 for a large Americano, highway robbery, and settled into one of those uncomfortable airport chairs. The kind that look modern and sleek, but feel like they were designed by someone who's never actually sat down before. But I didn't care. Nothing could kill my vibe today. This vacation was supposed to be our reset button. Things had been tense at home lately. Mariah seemed distant, always on her phone, always making excuses to run errands that took way longer than they should. The kids were picking up on it too. Ava had asked me last week if Mom was okay, and Julian had been extra clingy, like he sensed something was wrong but couldn't put his finger on it. But I was convinced that 10 days in paradise would fix everything. We'd reconnect, remember why we fell in love in the first place, give the kids some amazing memories. I'd already planned out the whole thing in my head. Morning swims with Julian, sunset walks on the beach with Mariah, teaching Ava how to snorkel in those crystal-clear waters. Hell, I'd even researched the best spots for family photos. I wanted to come back with enough pictures to fill 3 photo albums. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the villa's website one more time, even though I probably knew every detail by heart. Private infinity pool, outdoor kitchen, hammock strung between palm trees, direct beach access. The whole place screamed luxury, but in a laid-back, tropical way. Not stuffy or pretentious, just perfect. The gate area was starting to fill up with other passengers. I recognized a few families from the photos on the airline's website. You know how they always show those stock photos of happy families boarding planes? These folks looked just like that. Matching Hawaiian shirts, excited chatter about luau's and snorkeling. One family had twin boys who couldn't have been more than 6, both wearing identical shark t-shirts and carrying stuffed dolphins. I smiled, thinking about how Ava and Julian used to coordinate their outfits when they were younger. Mariah would dress them up like little twins even though they're 2 years apart. Those were simpler times. Better times, maybe. My phone buzzed. Text message. My heart jumped, thinking it was Mariah with an update, but it was just a notification from the airline confirming our flight. Still on time. Still plenty of seats available in first class. Still my family's dream vacation waiting to happen. I looked around the gate area one more time, half expecting to see them walking up with their roller bags and those travel pillows Mariah insisted on buying even though we were flying first class. But no sign of them yet. No big deal. They'd be here soon enough, probably rushing and apologizing for cutting it close, and we'd all laugh about it once we were settled into our seats with those warm towels and complimentary champagne. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes for a second, and let myself imagine the next 10 days. This was going to be the trip that saved us. I could feel it. God, I was such an idiot. By noon, I turned into one of those guys I used to feel sorry for. You know the type, constantly checking their phone like it holds the secrets to the universe. I'm talking every 30 seconds, minimum. Screen on, screen off, screen on again. No new messages. No missed calls. Nothing but that stupid default wallpaper staring back at me, mocking my growing anxiety. The first time I called Mariah was at 11:15. Straight to voicemail. Her voice sounded so normal, so cheerful. Hey, you've reached Mariah? Leave me a message, and I'll get back to you. I didn't leave one. What was I gonna say? Hey babe, just wondering where the hell you are when our plane boards in 2 hours. Nah, I kept it cool. Traffic was probably just worse than usual. LA traffic could turn a 30-minute drive into a 2-hour nightmare without warning. I tried texting the kids next. Ava usually responded within minutes. That girl was glued to her phone like it was a life support system. Hey sweetie, you guys close? Can't wait to see you. I added a bunch of those airplane and palm tree emojis she always uses. Nothing. Not even one of those thumbs up reactions she usually sends when she's busy. Julian was hit or miss with texting anyway. 11-year-old boys aren't exactly known for their communication skills, and he was probably too excited about the trip to focus on his phone. At least, that's what I told myself as I stared at the delivered notification under my message to him. I started people watching again, but now it felt different. Less fun, more desperate. Like I was trying to distract myself from the growing knot in my stomach. There was this family sitting across from me. Mom, dad, teenage daughter, and a little boy about Julian's age. They were playing some card game, all of them laughing at something the dad said. The mom kept reaching over to fix the little boy's hair, and he'd scrunch up his face and duck away, but he was grinning the whole time. That should have been us in about an hour. That was supposed to be us. At 12:30, I called Mariah again. Voicemail again. This time I left a message, trying to keep my voice light and casual. Hey babe, just checking in. Flight boards at 2:15, so if you're stuck in traffic, maybe give me a heads up? Love you. The departure board updated. Our flight was still on time. Gate 32, departure 3:45 p.m., destination Maui. I'd memorized every detail by now, like studying for a test I was definitely going to fail. I grabbed lunch from one of those airport sandwich places where they charge $15 for what amounts to grocery store cold cuts on stale bread. But I wasn't really hungry. I just needed something to do with my hands, some reason to sit somewhere different for a while. The turkey and Swiss tasted like cardboard, but I choked it down anyway. 1:30 p.m. rolled around, and I was officially starting to panic. Not full-blown panic, mind you, but that cold, creeping feeling you get when you realize something might be seriously wrong. I tried calling Mariah's sister Tiffany, thinking maybe they'd all gotten stuck somewhere together. Her phone went straight to voicemail too. Weird. Tiffany always answered her phone. Always. I started pacing around the gate area like some kind of caged animal. Other passengers were beginning to line up for boarding. First the business class folks, then the families with small children. I watched them with a mixture of envy and growing dread. Where was my family? Where were my wife and kids who were supposed to be here? excited and maybe a little frazzled, but here. 2:15 p.m. Boarding started. I heard the gate agent's voice over the intercom. We'd like to begin boarding flight 447 to Maui. We'll start with our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance. I stood there holding 4 boarding passes like some kind of idiot. The gate agent, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and too much makeup, looked at me expectantly. "Are you traveling alone today, sir?" "No," I said, probably too quickly. "My family's just running late. They'll be here any minute." She smiled that professional airline smile, polite but slightly skeptical. "Of course. Just let us know when they arrive." I stepped aside and watched as other first-class passengers boarded. A couple about our age, holding hands and looking ridiculously happy. An older man traveling alone, already absorbed in his tablet. A family with twin toddlers who were somehow managing to be both adorable and incredibly loud at the same time. 3 p.m. They called for general boarding. The gate area started emptying out as passengers filed down the jetway. I tried calling Mariah again and again. Each call went straight to that cheery voicemail message that was starting to feel like a cruel joke. The gate agent approached me again. "Sir? We're almost finished boarding. Are your family members going to make it?" I looked at her, and for the first time all day, I didn't have an easy answer. I don't know. They're not answering their phones." She checked her tablet. "We have 4 passengers who haven't checked in. I can hold the flight for a few more minutes, but not much longer." "Please," I said, hating how desperate I sounded. "Just a few more minutes." 3:30 p.m. The gate agent made the final boarding call. Her voice echoed through the nearly empty waiting area. "This is the final boarding call for flight 447 to Maui. Any remaining passengers should board immediately." She looked at me one more time. I could see the pity in her eyes now, mixed with that professional impatience that comes from dealing with passengers who miss flights every single day. "I'm sorry, sir, but we need to close the boarding door." I watched through the window as they pulled the jetway back from the plane. Watched as the ground crew directed the aircraft away from the gate. Watched as our dream vacation literally rolled away from me, taking with it 4 empty first-class seats and whatever was left of my certainty that everything was going to be okay. The departure board updated again. Flight 447 departed. On time. I was still standing there like a complete moron, holding for useless boarding passes and wondering what the hell had just happened to my life. By 1 a.m., I'd found myself a corner spot in the nearly deserted terminal, my back pressed against this cold concrete wall like I was trying to disappear into it. The janitors had made their rounds twice already, giving me those sideways looks that said, "What's this guy's deal?" But nobody bothered me. I guess I looked pathetic enough that even airport security figured I wasn't a threat to anyone except maybe myself. 16 hours. 16 goddamn hours I'd been sitting in this place, surrounded by those 4 boarding passes that had turned from tickets to paradise into evidence of my complete stupidity. They were scattered on the floor around me now, crumpled and torn from my nervous fidgeting. The gate area had long since emptied out, replaced by the late-night crowd, red-eye passengers looking zombie-tired, and a few airport workers grabbing coffee before their shifts. My phone battery was at 12%. I'd been rationing it like we were in some kind of disaster movie, only checking it every hour or so, but the silence was killing me more than any bad news could have. At least bad news would have been something. An explanation. A car accident. A family emergency. Hell, even food poisoning would have made more sense than this complete radio silence. But sitting there in that fluorescent-lit purgatory, watching the cleaning crew mop the same spots over and over again, I finally gave in to the urge I'd been fighting all day. I opened Instagram. I know. Social media is like digital crack when you're already feeling like shit, but I was desperate. Maybe Mariah had posted something. Maybe there was some clue about where they were, what had happened, why my entire family had vanished into thin air on what was supposed to be the best day of our year. The app loaded, and right there at the top of my feed was a story from Tiffany, Mariah's younger sister. The little circle around her profile pic was that bright orange color that meant she'd posted something recent. Really recent. My thumb hovered over it for a second, some part of my brain already sensing that whatever I was about to see was going to change everything. I tapped it. Having the best party in Hawaii. The words hit my eyes before the video even loaded, and I swear to God, my heart just stopped. Not like in the movies where people say their heart stopped, but keep talking. I mean, it literally felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed the life out of the damn thing. The video started playing. Shaky phone camera work, that vertical video format that drives me crazy under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. The footage showed a beach at sunset, one of those picture-perfect Hawaiian beaches with white sand and palm trees swaying in the breeze. There were people laughing in the background, that kind of loose, carefree laughter that comes with expensive drinks and zero responsibilities. And then the camera panned, and there she was. Mariah, my wife, my partner of 15 years, the mother of my children, the woman who'd kissed me goodbye that morning and told me to wait for them at the airport. She was wearing this flowing white sundress I'd never seen before, her hair done up in some kind of fancy braid with little flowers tucked into it. She looked beautiful. She looked relaxed. She looked like someone on vacation. She was holding a champagne flute, one of those expensive crystal ones you see in resort brochures, and she was laughing at something someone off camera had said. Not the polite laugh she used at work functions or family dinners. This was genuine, uninhibited joy, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. But that wasn't the worst part. I watched, frozen, as the camera kept moving, and suddenly there was a man's arm around her waist. Tan, muscular, with some kind of tribal tattoo wrapping around his bicep. The camera pulled back a little more, and I could see him fully, shirtless, probably in his early 30s, with that effortless beach god look that screams, I've never had a real job in my life, but somehow always have money. And then, Jesus Christ, I can still see it when I close my eyes. He leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek. Not some innocent vacation flirtation. A real kiss. The kind of kiss that says, we've done this before. The kind of kiss that says, we're going to do this again tonight. Her free hand came up to rest on his chest, and she melted into him like she was exactly where she belonged. The video kept playing, but I couldn't process anything else. My vision went all tunnel-like, and I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and irregular. My hands started shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. But I didn't drop it. Some masochistic part of me made me watch the whole thing. Made me see my wife, living it up in paradise with some random douchebag while I sat alone in an airport terminal like the world's biggest sucker. The video ended, and the next story autoplayed. More beach footage. More laughter. More shots of my wife looking happier than I'd seen her in years, wrapped around this stranger like they were the ones who'd been married for 15 years. I backed out of the story and stared at my phone's home screen, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The little Instagram notification was still there, mocking me. Tiffany shared a story. Yeah, no shit. She'd shared the story of my life falling apart in real time. My phone buzzed with a low battery warning. 12% down to 8%. Even my phone was giving up on me. I sat there against that cold wall, surrounded by the debris of my shattered plans, and finally understood what had happened. This wasn't some miscommunication or family emergency or act of God that had kept them from the airport. They'd never planned to come with me at all. She'd taken my money, my trust, my love for our family, and used it all to fund her own little romantic getaway while I sat here like a complete fool, waiting for people who were already exactly where they wanted to be. Without me. You know what's funny about having your entire world implode? The first thing that hits you isn't sadness or anger. It's this weird, crystal clear sense of purpose. Like suddenly, all the bullshit falls away, and you can see exactly what you need to do next. For me, sitting there on that cold airport floor with my dead phone and my dead marriage, the answer was simple. Get as far away from this nightmare as humanly possible. I didn't cry. I know that probably sounds cold or weird, but the tears just weren't there. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I'd used up all my emotions during those 16 hours of waiting, or maybe I was just done. Done with being the guy who gets left behind. Done with being the sucker who believes in happy families and dream vacations. Done with being me. I picked myself up off that floor, literally and figuratively, and walked over to the nearest departure board. It was almost 2 a.m., so my options were pretty limited. Red-eye flights to major cities, mostly. New York, Miami, Denver. But my eyes kept drifting to one destination that seemed to call out to me, Tokyo. Departure 3:15 a.m. One seat left in economy. Tokyo. I'd never been to Japan, never even thought about going. Hell, I barely spoke enough Spanish to order a burrito. let alone navigate a country where I didn't know a single word of the language. But that was exactly the point. I needed to go somewhere that would force me to become someone completely different. Somewhere I couldn't accidentally run into anyone from my old life. Somewhere I could disappear. The ticket counter agent looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Night shift at LAX probably wasn't anyone's dream job, but she perked up a little when I approached. Maybe desperate customers were easier to deal with than angry ones. I need a one-way ticket to Tokyo, I said, sliding my credit card across the counter before she could even ask for my ID. She gave me that look airline employees perfect, the one that says, "I've seen every kind of crazy, and you're definitely registering on the scale." But she started typing anyway. Any luggage to check? I looked down at myself. Wrinkled linen shirt, khaki shorts, flip-flops. The uniform of a man who dressed for a tropical vacation that would never happen. Nope, just me. Round trip. One way. She paused her typing and looked at me more carefully. "Sir, are you sure? One-way international tickets can be." "I'm sure." The transaction went through without a hitch. For $1,000 for a last-minute seat in coach. Under normal circumstances, I would have winced at the price. But these weren't normal circumstances, and honestly, what was money for if not escaping the wreckage of your life? I had about an hour to kill before boarding, so I found myself wandering through the terminal like a ghost. Everything looked different now, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. The families camped out at their gates, the business travelers hunched over their laptops, the janitors moving through their routines. It all felt distant and surreal. I passed a gift shop and impulsively bought a cheap backpack, some basic toiletries, and a change of clothes that would probably make me look like a tourist stereotype, but I didn't care. The old me would have cared. The old me would have worried about making a good impression, about having the right gear, about planning ahead. But the old me was an idiot who'd just spent 16 hours waiting for people who were never coming. At the gate, I turned my phone back on long enough to do two things. First, I canceled every reservation I'd made for the Hawaii trip. The villa, the tours, the restaurant bookings, all of it. Some places would probably keep my deposits, but I didn't give a damn. Consider it a donation to the Mariah's Cheating Heart Fund. Second, I sent one text message to my neighbor Dave, family emergency. "Can you keep an eye on the house for a while? Keys under the fake rock by the garage. Thanks." Then I powered the phone down and dropped it in a trash can. Yeah, I threw away my phone. My lifeline to the modern world. My connection to everyone and everything I'd ever known. It felt good. Liberating, even. Like cutting the last rope that tied me to shore. Boarding started right on schedule. I shuffled into line with the other economy passengers, mostly young backpackers and a few business travelers who looked as tired as I felt. The flight attendant scanned my boarding pass and gave me a practice smile. Traveling for business or pleasure? I had to think about that one for a second. Neither, I finally said. "I'm running away." She laughed, thinking I was making a joke. If only she knew. The plane was one of those massive international jets with 3 sections of seats across and enough room to house a small village. My seat was in the middle of the middle section, sandwiched between a college kid who smelled like energy drinks and patchouli and an older Japanese businessman who immediately fell asleep and started snoring. As we taxied away from the gate, I pressed my face against the tiny window and watched Los Angeles shrink beneath us. The city lights spread out like a circuit board, all those lives and dreams and disappointments reduced to tiny pinpricks of light. Somewhere down there was my house, probably dark and empty. Somewhere down there were my kids, hopefully asleep and unaware that their dad had just vanished into the night. That thought almost broke through my emotional numbness. Ava and Julian. What would they think when they woke up and found out I was gone? Would Mariah even tell them the truth, or would she spin some story about Daddy having a breakdown? But then I remembered that Instagram video, and the numbness settled back over me like a heavy blanket. Those kids had a mother who was perfectly capable of betraying the people who loved her most. Maybe they were better off learning that lesson sooner rather than later. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude, and the pilot came on the intercom with all the usual announcements about flight time and weather conditions. 13 hours to Tokyo. 13 hours to figure out who I was going to be when I landed. I stared out the window at nothing but darkness and clouds, and for the first time in hours, I felt something that might have been peace. Or maybe it was just exhaustion. Either way, I was done looking backward. The man I'd been for the past 15 years was gone, left behind in an airport terminal with some crumpled boarding passes and a broken heart. Whoever stepped off this plane in Tokyo was going to be someone entirely new. Someone who would never again be stupid enough to wait for people who weren't coming. For years, that's how long it took me to completely reinvent myself, to shed every trace of the man who'd sat broken in that airport terminal. For years of living like a ghost, moving through the world with no past and no connections to anything that came before Tokyo. The first few months were hell, not gonna lie. Landing in Japan with nothing but a tourist visa and a head full of anger was probably the stupidest thing I'd ever done, but desperation makes you do crazy shit. I burned through my savings fast, overpriced hotels, tourist trap restaurants, language barrier frustrations that cost me money every single day. But slowly, piece by piece, I figured it out. The name change was the easy part. Marcus Doyle. I picked it out of thin air while sitting in some government office, staring at forms I could barely read. Marcus sounded strong, decisive. Doyle felt Irish, working class, the kind of guy who fixed problems with his hands instead of drowning in emotional bullshit. The paperwork was a nightmare, visa extensions, work permits, all that bureaucratic red tape. But I had one advantage. I genuinely didn't want to go back to America. That kind of desperation makes you very motivated to jump through hoops. Learning Japanese was like trying to solve a puzzle where someone kept changing the rules. I started with those tourist phrase books, the kind that teach you how to ask for directions to the bathroom, but not how to actually live somewhere. Then I graduated to language apps, sitting in tiny internet cafes for hours, repeating the same words over and over until they started to feel natural in my mouth. Sumimasen. Arigatou gozaimasu. Watashi no name wa Marcus desu. But the real education came from necessity. When you can't afford to eat at places with English menus, you learn food words fast. When you need a job and can't communicate with potential employers, you figure out work vocabulary real quick. I became fluent in survival Japanese. Not the pretty, textbook stuff, but the gritty, everyday language of someone trying to make it in a foreign country. The odd jobs kept me afloat those first couple years. I washed dishes in tiny ramen shops where the owners pretended not to notice I was working illegally. I hauled boxes at warehouses where nobody asked questions as long as you showed up on time and didn't steal anything. I even spent a few months teaching English conversation to businessmen, which was ironic as hell considering I was running away from my own language and culture. But the real turning point came when I started bartending at this dive bar in Shibuya. The owner, this old guy named Tanaka-san, took pity on me for some reason. Maybe he recognized a fellow refugee from something. I never asked about his story, and he never asked about mine. He taught me how to make drinks the Japanese way, which is basically like everything else in Japan, precise, respectful, and way more complicated than it needs to be. I was good at it, though. Turns out, when you've spent 15 years listening to people's problems as a husband and father, you've got the basic skills for bartending down cold. I could mix drinks, sure, but more importantly, I could listen. Really listen. Drunk salarymen would stumble in at midnight and pour their hearts out in broken English mixed with Japanese, and I'd just nod and pour and let them talk. Sometimes that's all people need, someone who won't judge them for falling apart. After 2 years of that, I'd saved enough money to take a real shot at something. I found this tiny space in Kyoto, way off the beaten path, just big enough for maybe 15 people if they were all really friendly. The rent was cheap because the previous tenant had bailed, leaving behind some basic equipment and a lot of debt that wasn't legally mine, but felt like it anyway. I turned it into a cafe. Nothing fancy, nothing that would show up in guidebooks or Instagram feeds. Just good coffee, simple food, and a quiet place where people could sit and think. I kept the decor minimal, wooden tables, mismatched chairs, plants that somehow survived despite my complete lack of gardening skills. The locals loved it because it wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. Tourists found it too, eventually. Word of mouth travels fast in a city like Kyoto, especially when you're serving decent coffee at reasonable prices. I became known as the American guy who barely spoke but made excellent espresso. People would come in, order their drinks, and sit in comfortable silence. No Wi-Fi, no charging stations, no pressure to buy more than you wanted. Just a place to exist for a while. The apartment above the cafe became my whole world. One room, barely bigger than a hotel suite, with a futon that doubled as my couch and a kitchen that was basically a hot plate and a mini fridge. I owned maybe 20 things total: clothes, books, the bare minimum needed to function. It was the opposite of the life I'd left behind, where every closet was stuffed with things I'd bought because I thought I was supposed to want them. I didn't date, didn't make close friends, didn't join expat groups, or try to recreate some version of American life in Japan. I spoke to customers, neighbors, suppliers, the basic social interactions required to function, but I kept everything surface level. People respected that in Japan. They understood the value of privacy, of keeping your business to yourself. Sometimes, late at night when the cafe was closed and the streets were empty, I'd catch myself wondering about Ava and Julian. They'd be 15 and 13 by now, probably taller than I remembered, dealing with all the normal teenage bullshit that seems so important when you're living it. Did they miss me? Did they hate me for leaving? Did they even remember me clearly? Or had I become just a vague memory of someone who used to live in their house? But I'd learned to push those thoughts away. The man who'd loved those kids, who'd planned family vacations and worried about their homework, that guy was gone. He died in an airport terminal, killed by the woman who was supposed to love him most. Marcus Doyle didn't have children. Marcus Doyle had a cafe, a simple life, and absolutely zero interest in trusting anyone enough to get hurt again. For years of that life, for years of deliberate isolation, of choosing loneliness over vulnerability, I thought I'd found peace. I was wrong about that, too. October mornings in Kyoto had this crisp quality that I'd grown to love, the kind of cool air that made you want to wrap your hands around a warm coffee cup and just breathe. I was going through my usual routine, unlocking the cafe's front door, flipping chairs down from tables, firing up the espresso machine that had become my most reliable companion over the past 4 years. The morning light filtered through the windows just right, hitting the wooden tables at that perfect angle that made the whole place feel like something out of a postcard. I'd gotten good at these quiet moments. They were mine, completely and totally mine, before the day started bringing in customers with their small talk and polite smiles. I cherished that solitude, that sense of being exactly where I belonged, answerable to no one but myself, and the simple rhythm of running a small business. But as I reached for the light switch, I remembered I'd left my personal phone upstairs. The one I kept hidden in a drawer, powered off 99% of the time. I'd bought it about a year into my life as Marcus Doyle, telling myself it was just for emergencies. If something happened to the cafe, if I needed to contact suppliers, basic adult in the modern world stuff. But really, it was insurance against my own isolation. A lifeline I hoped I'd never need to use. I hadn't turned it on in maybe 3 months. There was never any reason to. Who was going to call Marcus Doyle? I didn't have friends here, didn't have family, didn't have anyone who would notice if I disappeared tomorrow. That had been the whole point. But something made me climb those narrow stairs to my apartment. Maybe just the vague feeling that I should check it. Make sure it still worked. Adult responsibility bullshit that my old self would have been proud of. I dug the phone out of the drawer where it lived under some old receipts and a Japanese-English dictionary I never used anymore. The thing felt foreign in my hands, like an artifact from someone else's life. I powered it on and waited for it to boot up, expecting maybe a few spam texts or notifications about software updates. The screen lit up, and my heart damn near stopped. 135 missed calls, all from the same number. All from a contact I'd never deleted because I'd never thought I'd need to. Mariah. My hands started shaking before my brain could even process what I was seeing. 135 times. She'd called me 135 times. The call log showed them spread out over the past 2 weeks, some clustered together like she'd been frantically hitting redial, others spaced hours apart like she'd been trying to pace herself. The most recent call was from yesterday, 11:47 p.m. Japan time, which meant it was morning in LA. She'd been calling me while I was sleeping, while I was going through my normal routine of closing the cafe and reading before bed, completely oblivious to the fact that my carefully constructed new life was about to get blown to pieces. My thumb hovered over the voicemail icon. 47 new voicemails. 47 messages from a woman I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, a woman whose voice I'd trained myself to forget. Part of me wanted to delete them all without listening, to chuck the phone back in the drawer and pretend this wasn't happening. But I couldn't. Some sick, masochistic part of me needed to know what could possibly be important enough to call 135 times. I scrolled through the text messages first, trying to prepare myself for whatever emotional minefield I was about to walk into. Please pick up. I need your help. I know I was wrong. Something happened. The kids. My blood went cold at that last one. The kids. Ava and Julian. Jesus Christ, what if something had happened to them? What if they were hurt, or sick, or worse? What if while I was playing hide-and-seek in Japan, building my little fortress of solitude, my children had needed their father, and I'd been too busy being a selfish asshole to be there? I was about to call her back, finger literally hovering over her contact, when I heard it. Knocking. Not the polite, tentative knock of a customer who wasn't sure if we were open yet. This was urgent, demanding, the kind of knocking that said, I know you're in there, and I'm not leaving until you answer. I looked at my phone again. The most recent call had been last night. If Mariah was calling from LA, she couldn't be the one knocking on my door in Kyoto at 7:30 in the morning. Could she? The knocking got louder, more insistent. I crept down the stairs, keeping to the sides where the boards didn't creak, and peered through the cafe's front window. My entire world tilted sideways. There she was, Mariah, standing on my doorstep in the rain, looking like she'd been through hell. Her hair was plastered to her head, her makeup smeared and running down her cheeks. She was wearing jeans and a wrinkled sweater, clothes that looked like she'd slept in them, maybe for days. She looked older, thinner, like someone who hadn't been eating or sleeping properly. But it was definitely her. The woman who destroyed my life 4 years ago was standing outside my cafe in Kyoto, Japan, at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, pounding on my door like her life depended on it. I stood there frozen, watching her through the glass like she was some kind of ghost. How the hell had she found me? I'd been so careful, so thorough about disappearing. I'd changed my name, gotten new documents, paid cash for everything, avoided any kind of digital footprint that could lead back to my old life. I was Marcus Doyle, cafe owner, quiet American expat who minded his own business and bothered no one. But somehow, she tracked me down. The knocking stopped for a moment, and I thought maybe she'd given up. Maybe she'd realized this was a mistake and would just disappear back into whatever crisis had brought her here. But then she pressed her face against the glass, cupping her hands around her eyes to see inside, and our eyes met. For years of careful emotional distance, for years of building walls around my heart, for years of convincing myself that I was better off alone, all of it crumbled in that single moment of eye contact. She'd found me. After all this time, after all my efforts to become someone else, the past had tracked me down like a bloodhound. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass, but I could read her lips well enough. Please. I stood there for another few seconds, phone still in my hand with those 135 missed calls glowing on the screen, watching the woman who'd shattered my world stand in the rain begging me to let her in. And despite every instinct screaming at me to walk away, despite 4 years of swearing I'd never let anyone hurt me like that again, despite the fact that opening that door would probably destroy the peaceful life I'd built, I reached for the lock. I didn't open the door immediately. Call it spite, call it self-preservation, call it whatever you want. But I let her stand out there in that cold October rain for a full minute, maybe 2. Long enough for her to really feel what it was like to wait for someone who might not show up. Long enough for her to understand, just a little bit, what I'd experienced in that airport terminal 4 years ago. She kept knocking, but softer now, more desperate. Her knuckles were probably getting raw against the wooden door, but I wasn't in any hurry to rescue her from discomfort. I watched through the window as she pressed her forehead against the glass, her breath fogging up the surface. She looked like hell, not just from the rain, but from something deeper. Whatever had driven her halfway across the world to find me had taken a serious toll. Good. Maybe now she knew what rock bottom felt like. When I finally turned the lock and cracked the door open, I didn't step aside to let her in. I just stood there in the gap, blocking her entry, forcing her to look up at me from the step below. The rain was coming down harder now, and she was shivering, but I wasn't feeling particularly charitable. You found me, I said quietly. My voice came out different than I expected, not angry, not emotional, just flat. For years of practice at keeping my feelings locked down had trained me well. Marcus, she started, and the sound of that name in her voice made my skin crawl. It's not Marcus. I cut her off. You don't get to call me anything. You lost that privilege when you left me sitting in an airport for 16 hours while you were screwing some beach bum in Hawaii. Her face crumpled at that, like I'd slapped her. Tears started mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks, but I wasn't moved. I'd seen her cry before, when she wanted something, when she got caught in a lie, when she needed to manipulate a situation. Mariah's tears were just another tool in her toolkit. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. I know I don't deserve it, but please let me explain. I've been looking for you for 2 years. 2 years of hiring private investigators, following dead ends, spending every penny I had left just to find you. 2 years. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's funny, because 4 years ago, you couldn't be bothered to show up for a family vacation you knew meant everything to me. But now you've spent 2 years tracking me down? What changed, Mariah? Did your boy toy finally get tired of your bullshit? That hit home. I could see it in the way her shoulders sagged, the way she closed her eyes like she was trying to block out my words. But I wasn't done. For years of suppressed rage was bubbling up, and she was going to hear every damn word of it. You know what the real kicker is? I continued, still not letting her inside. I stood there for 16 hours. 16 hours. Making excuses for you, defending you to airline staff, telling myself there had to be some reasonable explanation. And the whole time, you were living it up on my dime with some random asshole you probably met on Tinder. It wasn't like that, she tried to interrupt. Shut up. The words came out harder than I intended, but they shut her up. You don't get to rewrite history now. I saw the video, remember? I saw you laughing, kissing him, looking happier than you'd looked with me in years. So don't stand there and try to feed me some bullshit about how it wasn't what it looked like. The rain was really coming down now, turning the narrow street into a small river. A few early commuters hurried past, umbrellas up, pointedly ignoring the domestic drama playing out on my doorstep. In Japan, people minded their own business. It was one of the things I'd grown to love about living here. Mariah was soaked through, her clothes clinging to her frame, and I realized she looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner, like she'd been sick, or stressed, or both. For just a second, I felt a flicker of the old protective instinct, the part of me that had spent 15 years trying to fix her problems and make her happy. But then I remembered sitting on that airport floor, watching her betray everything we'd built together, and the feeling died. I need your help, she said finally, her voice breaking. Everything fell apart. Everything. Tyler, the guy from Hawaii, he left me after 2 months. Took half my money and disappeared. Your parents, they disowned me when they found out what I'd done. Cut off all contact. Won't even let me bring the kids to see them anymore. Tyler. So that was Beach Boy's name. I filed that information away, though I wasn't sure why it mattered. And the kids? I asked, hating myself for caring, but unable to stop the words from coming out. Ava blames me for everything. She barely speaks to me, spends all her time at friends' houses. And Julian. Her voice broke completely. Julian asks about you every day. Every single day. He keeps asking when Daddy's coming home, and I don't know what to tell him anymore. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Julian. My little boy who used to climb into bed with me on Sunday mornings and ask me to tell him stories about dragons and space knights. He'd be 15 now, almost grown up, but apparently still asking for his dad. I shook my head, forcing myself to stay focused. That's your problem, not mine. You made your choices. You live with the consequences. I know, she cried, and for the first time, her voice had some real emotion in it. Not manipulation, not performance, just raw, desperate honesty. I know I fucked up everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your help or anything from you. But I'm drowning here, and I don't know what else to do. She fell to her knees right there on my doorstep, rain pouring down on her, and for a moment, she looked like a broken child rather than the woman who'd destroyed my life. I lost everything, she whispered. The house, my job, my family, my friends. Everyone who mattered. And I know it's my fault. I know I did this to myself, but I can't fix it alone. I've tried for 4 years to fix it alone, and I just keep making it worse. I stood there looking down at her. This woman who'd once been everything to me, now literally on her knees in the rain outside my cafe. Part of me, a part one thought I'd killed years ago, wanted to help her up, bring her inside, make her some coffee, and listen to her problems like I used to do. But Marcus Doyle wasn't that guy. Marcus Doyle had learned the hard way that some people would take everything you had to give and still leave you with nothing. Get up, I said, my voice still flat and emotionless. You're making a scene. She looked up at me with those same brown eyes that had once made me believe in forever, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Complete and total defeat. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. I can't keep pretending I'm strong enough to handle this alone. I need you. No, I said, stepping back and starting to close the door. You need someone. But that someone isn't me. Not anymore. And then I closed the door in her face, turned the lock, and walked away. But I could still hear her crying through the wood, and despite everything she'd done to me, despite 4 years of building walls around my heart, that sound followed me up the stairs like a ghost. 3 hours later, she was still there. I could see her through the upstairs window, sitting on the curb across from the cafe like some kind of lost tourist. The rain had stopped, but she was still soaked, still looking like the world had chewed her up and spit her out. A couple of my regular customers had asked about the foreign lady sitting outside, and I'd just shrugged and said I didn't know anything about it. But I did know. And despite every rational thought in my head telling me to ignore her until she went away, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I burned 2 orders of coffee, messed up a simple sandwich order, and caught myself staring out the window every few minutes like some lovesick teenager. Damn it. At closing time, I flipped the sign and locked the front door, but instead of heading upstairs like usual, I walked outside. She was still there, sitting on that curb with her knees pulled up to her chest, looking small and defeated in the growing dusk. Cafe's closed, I said, standing a few feet away from her. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I know. I didn't know where else to go. Against my better judgment. Hell, against every survival instinct I'd developed over the past 4 years. I found myself saying, come inside. But only because you're making my neighbors uncomfortable. The lie came easily. My neighbors probably didn't give a shit about some random foreigner sitting on the street. But I needed an excuse that didn't make me sound like I still cared about her well-being. I led her into the empty cafe and gestured to one of the tables near the window. The place felt different with her in it, like she'd brought some piece of our old life with her that didn't belong in my carefully constructed new world. Talk, I said, sitting across from her, but keeping my distance. You've got 20 minutes, then I want you gone. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand and took a shaky breath. Thank you. I know you don't owe me anything. 18 minutes, I interrupted. That got her moving. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing this speech for months. It was never supposed to happen the way it did. The Hawaii trip. It was supposed to be a girls' weekend. Me, Tiffany, my cousin Sarah. Just a few days to decompress, you know? We'd been fighting so much, and I thought maybe some time apart would help us figure things out. I stayed silent, letting her dig her own grave. But then Tyler showed up. He was Tiffany's friend, and she invited him without telling me. And I was angry at you about the promotion you didn't get, and the way you'd been working so many hours, and I felt like you didn't see me anymore. So you used my money to fund your affair. My voice was flat, matter of fact. It wasn't an affair, she protested. Not at first. It was just attention. Someone who looked at me like I was interesting again. Someone who didn't know about our problems, or our mortgage, or how Julian had been acting out at school. He just saw me. And you saw his abs. She flinched. It was more than that. Was it? Because from where I sat, literally sat, in an airport for 16 hours. It looked pretty fucking shallow. The profanity hung in the air between us. I hadn't cursed at her in all our years together, not even during our worst fights. But then again, the man she'd known wouldn't have cursed at anyone. You're right, she said quietly. It was shallow and stupid, and I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. When I realized you weren't going to show up, I wasn't going to show up. I leaned forward, my carefully maintained composure cracking. Lady, I sat in that airport from 8 in the morning until past midnight. I had our boarding passes, our reservations, everything. You were supposed to meet me there. Her face went white. What are you talking about? The airport, Mariah? Lax. Gate 32. Where I waited for you and the kids for 16 fucking hours. But we never planned to meet you there. The plan was always for us to fly separately. I was supposed to call you when we landed. Everything stopped. The air in the cafe went dead silent except for the humming of the espresso machine and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. We were supposed to take the evening flight. You were taking the morning one to get the villa set up. I was bringing the kids later because Julian had that soccer game. Don't you remember? We talked about it the night before. I stared at her, my mind reeling. No, that's not. You said to wait for you at the airport. You said you'd be there soon. I said I'd see you soon. In Hawaii. I never said I'd meet you at LAX. The photo. She reached into her wet purse and pulled out something I recognized. A picture of us from 10 years ago, standing in front of our first apartment, both of us grinning like idiots who thought they had the world figured out. She slid it across the table toward me. I kept this, she said, through everything that happened after. Through Tyler leaving, through losing the house, through all of it. Because no matter how badly I screwed up, this was real. We were real. I picked up the photo with trembling hands. We looked so young, so happy, so completely clueless about what life was going to throw at us. Burn this, I said, my voice barely audible. I slid it back to her. That man doesn't live here anymore. For 3 days, she haunted my neighborhood like a ghost who couldn't figure out she was dead. I'd catch glimpses of her through the cafe windows, sitting at the bus stop across the street, wandering the narrow side streets, buying convenience store food she probably couldn't read the labels on. She never approached the cafe again, never tried to force another conversation, but her presence hung over everything like smoke. My regular customers started asking questions. Mrs. Yamamoto, who came in every morning for her green tea latte, wanted to know if this sad American lady was okay. Kinji, the college student who studied at my corner table every afternoon, asked if I needed him to call someone. Even Tanaka-san from the bar stopped by to check on me, probably sensing that my carefully maintained peace had been shattered. Trouble from home? He asked in his broken English, eyeing me while I fumbled through making his usual espresso. Something like that. I replied in Japanese, not trusting my voice in English. He nodded like he understood everything I wasn't saying. Sometimes the past follows us, even when we run very far. Yeah, no shit. On the third morning, I found an envelope slipped under the cafe door. No name on it, just my handwriting. The old handwriting, from before I'd trained myself to write like Marcus Doyle. Inside was a single sheet of hotel stationery, covered in Mariah's familiar scrawl. I almost threw it away without reading it. Almost. But something made me unfold it, maybe the same sick curiosity that makes you slow down at car accidents. I'm leaving today. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say this before I go. Asterisk. I spent 4 years telling myself that what happened in Hawaii was your fault somehow. That you'd abandoned us. That you'd chosen to disappear rather than fight for our family. It was easier than admitting that I destroyed everything good in my life for a few weeks of feeling special. Asterisk. Finding out about the airport, about the misunderstanding, it doesn't change what I did. I still cheated. I still lied. I still chose him over you when it mattered. But at least now I understand why you ran so far. Asterisk. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to come home. I just wanted you to know that Ava graduated high school last month. Valedictorian. She's going to Stanford in the fall, wants to study engineering. She has your brain and your stubbornness. Asterisk. Julian made varsity soccer as a sophomore. He's taller than you now. Can you believe that? He still asks about you, but not as much. I think he's finally starting to understand that some people leave and don't come back. Asterisk. I'm sorry. For all of it. For the lies, for the cheating, for letting you think I'd abandoned you at that airport. For not being strong enough to fix what I broke. For hunting you down when you'd clearly found peace. Asterisk. Take care of yourself. You deserve better than what I gave you. Asterisk. Mariah asterisk. P.S. I'm not taking the photo. Some things should stay buried. Asterisk. I read it twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Then I immediately pulled it back out, smoothed it flat, and read it again. Ava, valedictorian. Julian on varsity soccer. My kids, growing up without me, becoming people I'd never know. That should have hurt more than it did. But 4 years of emotional scar tissue had done its job. I felt the information settle into my brain like data being filed away, important, but not devastating. Later that afternoon, I walked past the budget hotel where she'd been staying. The clerk confirmed she'd checked out that morning, heading back to the airport with a single suitcase and eyes like someone who'd lost a war. Good. She could go back to whatever mess she'd made of her life in LA, and I could go back to mine here. Clean, simple, uncomplicated. That evening, I wrote 2 letters. Short ones. One to Ava, congratulating her on graduation and Stanford. One to Julian, telling him I was proud of his soccer achievements. I didn't explain where I was or why I'd left. I didn't make promises about staying in touch or visiting. I just acknowledged that they existed, that I remembered them, that somewhere in the world their father was alive and thinking about them. I mailed them to our old address, figuring Mariah would forward them if they'd moved. Or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I'd done what felt right. The rest was up to them. Christmas in Kyoto wasn't like Christmas anywhere else I'd ever been. No mall Santas, no aggressive holiday shoppers, no family guilt trips disguised as festive gatherings. Just the quiet beauty of snow dusting ancient temples and the soft glow of lanterns reflecting off the river that ran through the heart of the city. I stood on the Togutsukiyo Bridge that Christmas evening, watching paper lanterns drift downstream like tiny prayers floating toward the sea. The snow fell in fat, lazy flakes that stuck to my jacket and melted on my face, and for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: peace. Not the fake peace I'd been telling myself I had for the past 4 years. Not the bitter satisfaction of hiding from my problems or the hollow victory of proving I could survive alone. This was different. This was the kind of peace that comes from finally, truly letting go. A young couple passed by on the bridge, laughing as they tried to catch snowflakes on their tongues. Between them walked a little girl, maybe 6 years old, bundled up in a bright red coat that made her look like a tiny Christmas ornament. She was chattering away in rapid Japanese, pointing at the lanterns and asking her parents a million questions about where they were going and who had made them. I smiled watching them, not from pain, not from longing for what I'd lost, but from genuine joy at seeing a family that was whole and happy and completely absorbed in their moment together. That little girl reminded me that not all families were minefields waiting to explode. Some people actually got it right.